38 years ago, a woman named Loretta Vasquez drove away from the Ponderosa Motel on Route 89A in Cottonwood, Arizona, and was never seen alive again, leaving behind an open room door, a half-eaten sandwich on the nightstand, and a green canvas overnight bag with her daughter's school photograph tucked inside the front pocket. Authorities concluded she had left voluntarily. They said there was no evidence of foul play. They said a woman who checked herself into a motel on a Wednesday night and left her key at the front desk on Thursday morning had simply moved on. Loretta's sister, Rosa, who had driven 40 miles from her home in Prescott to file the report in person, was told to give it some time. Rosa Medina gave it 38 years. She wrote letters. She made phone calls. She sat across from 3 different sheriffs in that same Yavapai County building over the span of 4 decades and put the same folder on the same kind of desk and said the same thing. My sister did not just leave. That green bag is still in an evidence locker somewhere. Her daughter's photograph is in that bag. Loretta would never have left it behind. She would never have left her daughter behind. Then, in March of 2025, a retired irrigation contractor named Dale Pruitt was cited for unrelated property violations on a parcel of land he had owned since 1984, and the deputy who walked that land called in something she had not been prepared to find. What came next would reach back across 38 years and prove Rosa Medina right about everything. But before we get to what that deputy found in the desert outside Cornville, you have to understand who Loretta Vasquez was. Because to understand what was taken from that family in the summer of 1987, you first have to understand the world she had built for herself and her daughter in the high desert of the Verde Valley. Cottonwood, Arizona in 1987 was a working town, not a tourist town. The kind of place that would eventually become known for its wine trail and its art galleries, but hadn't gotten there yet. In 1987, it was copper country money starting to thin out. Ranchers and orchard families, the smell of cottonwood trees along the Verde River, and a main street where 3 of the 4 stoplights were still blinking yellow after 9 at night. Population just under 5,000. The nearest McDonald's was 20 miles south in Camp Verde, and people drove to it on Friday evenings the way people in other places drove to the movies. Loretta Vasquez was 31 years old that summer. She worked the front desk at Yavapai Title and Escrow on Main Street, a job she had taken 3 years earlier when her daughter Isabella was just starting first grade. Before that, she had done bookkeeping for a ranch supply company out of Clarkdale, and before that, she had put herself through 2 years of business school in Flagstaff while working weekends at a laundromat on Milton Road. She was the kind of woman who did not wait for things to come to her. She planned. She saved. She kept a spiral notebook in her desk drawer at work, where she wrote down her goals in a column on the left side and the steps to reach them on the right. Isabella was 8 years old and had recently lost her 2 front teeth and was deeply proud of it. She carried a My Little Pony lunchbox to Clemenceau Elementary and had a habit of saving her dessert until after she had finished everything else on her plate. A habit, her grandmother always said, that she had gotten from Loretta. Loretta kept Isabella's school photographs framed on the wall above the kitchen table. One from each year so far, a small progression of the same dark eyes and gap-toothed smiles, getting a little taller each time. The photograph she carried in her overnight bag was the 2nd grade picture. Isabella in a yellow dress, her hair in 2 braids, smiling at the camera the way children smile when the photographer has just told them a joke they didn't quite understand, but laughed at anyway. Loretta's sister Rosa described her in those years as someone who had momentum. She wasn't running from anything, Rosa would say, long after. She was running toward something. She had a plan. The plan, as Rosa understood it, involved a real estate license and a house with a yard for Isabella by the time the girl started middle school. It was not a grand plan. It was a sensible one. The kind of plan you make when you have learned to trust your own effort over your own luck. On the evening of Wednesday, August 12, 1987, Loretta told Rosa by phone that she had a meeting the following morning she would explain later. She sounded fine, she said. She loved her. She said she would call Thursday afternoon. That was the last conversation Rosa Medina ever had with her sister. The desk clerk at the Ponderosa Motel, a retired schoolteacher named Glenn Harbor who worked evenings for extra income, checked Loretta in at 9:40 on Wednesday night. He remembered her clearly. She had paid cash, which was not unusual, and she had asked whether the room had a phone that could receive incoming calls, which he thought was. He showed her to room 7 at the north end of the building. He saw the light under her door when he made his 11 o'clock walk through. That was the last time anyone placed Loretta Vasquez in that room with certainty. By 7:15 Thursday morning, Glenn Harbor found the door to room 7 open and the room empty. The bed had been slept in on one side. The television was off. The overnight bag was on the chair by the window, zipped closed. The key was on the nightstand. The half-eaten sandwich, turkey on white bread, wrapped in wax paper, the kind sold at the gas station 2 doors down, was on the nightstand beside it. He waited until 8 o'clock. Then he called the front desk and asked his supervisor what to do. Loretta's car, a 1984 Datsun hatchback in faded tan, was still in the motel parking lot. It stayed there through Thursday. By Friday morning, Glenn Harbor's supervisor called the Yavapai County Sheriff's Department. The responding deputy, a man named Carl Wester, walked the room, photographed the bag and the sandwich and the key, and noted in his report that there was no sign of disturbance. No blood. No broken furniture. No indication of a struggle. He attempted to locate next of kin through the registration card, but Loretta had listed only her own name and her Cottonwood address. It was Rosa, calling repeatedly to Loretta's apartment on Thursday and Friday, who finally reached a neighbor who told her the Datsun had been sitting at the Ponderosa for 2 days. Rosa filed the missing persons report herself on Saturday, August 15, 1987. She sat across from a duty sergeant named Ralph Burdick and told him what she knew. Her sister had a meeting Wednesday night or Thursday morning, had checked into the motel, and had not been seen or heard from since. The overnight bag. The photograph. The car still in the lot. Sergeant Burdick noted the report. He told Rosa there was no evidence of foul play. He told her that women sometimes needed to step away. He told her to give it some time. The Datsun was eventually impounded. The overnight bag and its contents, including Isabella's school photograph, were logged into the evidence system. Loretta's apartment was cleared by her landlord after 90 days. He put what he found in 2 boxes and left them with the building manager. Nobody came to claim them. There was one lead that received almost no attention in those early days. A man named Dale Pruitt, 34 years old, had worked for the same escrow company where Loretta was employed, not in the office but as a contract courier, dropping off and picking up deed packets twice a week. He was well liked in that capacity. The office manager, a woman named Patricia Huff, would remember him as a man who was always pleasant and always on time. He had been seen in the office in the days before Loretta's disappearance. When contacted by investigators in the fall of 1987, he said he barely knew her. He said he had nothing to tell them. He said he was sorry to hear she was missing. Investigators moved on. The case file was marked inactive in January of 1988. Rosa Medina did not accept that. She called every 6 months for the first 5 years. She hired a private investigator in 1993, who spent 3 weeks reviewing the file and told her there was very little there to work with. She wrote to the State Attorney General's office in 1998. She wrote again in 2004. She kept a folder, the way her sister had kept a spiral notebook, everything on the left side, all the unanswered questions on the right. By 2001, Isabella Vasquez was 22 years old and had just graduated from Northern Arizona University with a degree in accounting. She had grown up in Rosa's house in Prescott after her mother's disappearance, and she carried her mother's second-grade photograph, a duplicate Rosa had made from the original, in her wallet. She kept it there for the next 24 years. The years took their toll in the way years do when a wound never closes. Rosa developed rheumatoid arthritis in her late 50s and began to walk with a cane. Her husband Carl died in 2009. The cottonwood they had known changed around them as the Verde Valley discovered tourism and wine, and the main street filled with galleries and tasting rooms. The Ponderosa Motel was torn down in 2003 and replaced by a chain hotel. The escrow company where Loretta had worked closed in 1995. By 2015, Isabella had moved back to the Verde Valley with her own family, a husband named Marco and 2 daughters, ages 7 and 9. She settled in Cottonwood and coached her younger daughter's soccer team at the same park where her mother had sometimes taken her to play. She had never fully come to terms with not knowing. She told her daughters what she knew, simply and honestly, in the way her Aunt Rosa had always told her, "Your grandmother was a woman with a plan. She was running toward something." And someone took that from her. The reward poster Rosa had printed in 1990 and distributed throughout Yavapai County had long since disappeared from every window and bulletin board. The case number sat untouched in a filing cabinet at the Yavapai County Sheriff's Department for nearly 2 decades. The detective who had inherited the file in 1994, a careful, methodical man named Ray Torres of the Yavapai County Sheriff's Cold Case Unit, had reviewed it twice, in 1994 and again in 2007, and both times arrived at the same wall. No body. No physical evidence from a crime scene. A missing persons report that the original investigating officers had treated as a voluntary departure. Very little to work from. Torres had retired in 2018. But he had kept a copy of the case file summary in a folder in his home office. He had given it to his successor, a detective named Marisol Fuentes, who was 36 years old and 11 years into her career with the Cold Case Unit, and he had told her, "This one bothers me. This one is worth another look when the tools get better." Every case on this channel represents weeks of research, verifying facts and piecing together lives that deserved better. If you want us to keep uncovering the truth behind stories like this one, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your support is what makes this possible. Now let's get back to Loretta Vasquez. Then, in February of 2025, the tools got better. A Yavapai County property enforcement officer named Deputy Sandra Calmes was conducting a routine inspection of a parcel of agricultural land outside Cornville, Arizona, roughly 11 miles from the Ponderosa Motel, when she identified several violations on a property registered to Adele Pruitt. The land had not been actively farmed in years. There were abandoned structures, an unpermitted well cap, and a section of disturbed ground near a dry creek bed that had been covered with concrete at some point in the past. Concrete that was cracked now, heaved by years of freeze-thaw cycles and the roots of a spreading mesquite tree. Deputy Combs photographed the concrete and noted its irregular placement. She submitted her report. Her supervisor flagged it to the county building department. The building department consulted with the sheriff's department. A ground-penetrating radar assessment was ordered, It was Detective Marisol Fuentes who made the call to look up the property owner's name before the radar team arrived. She was in her office on a Tuesday morning in early March. She ran the name: Dale Pruitt. She cross-referenced against open and inactive cases. The system returned one match. She sat very still for a moment. Then she called her supervisor. "I need to be on that property," she said, "today." The ground-penetrating radar scan of the concrete pad near the Dry Creek bed took approximately 4 hours on March 11, 2025. Ground-penetrating radar works by sending electromagnetic pulses into the ground and reading how they bounce back. Differences in density or composition register as anomalies, and what appears on the screen is a map of what lies below the surface that the eye cannot see. What the radar team found beneath that cracked concrete was an anomaly consistent with human remains. Forensic excavation began the following morning. Dale Pruitt was 72 years old in March of 2025. He had lived in the Verde Valley his entire life and was known in Cornville as a man who kept to himself and kept his word. He had operated a small irrigation, contracting business for 30 years before retiring in 2017. He went to the hardware store on Saturday mornings. He drove a late-model pickup truck. His neighbors described him as quiet and neighborly in the distant way of rural Arizona men of his generation. Someone who would wave from across the road and help if you asked, and otherwise leave you alone. He had never married. He had no criminal record. He had worked for 2 years as a courier for Yavapai Title and Escrow. Records show that Dale Pruitt had been present at the Cottonwood office on August 11, 1987, the day before Loretta checked into the Ponderosa Motel. A delivery log recovered from archived company records documented his signature on a packet receipt at 11:15 that morning. Loretta Vasquez's name appeared twice on the same log, on transactions she had processed. Court documents filed in May of 2025 detail what investigators believe occurred. They believe Loretta had discovered a discrepancy in the deed transactions Pruitt was handling, a pattern of altered parcel boundary records that investigators would later connect to a small-scale land fraud scheme involving at least 3 Verde Valley properties. Loretta, methodical and careful, the woman who kept goals in a spiral notebook and wrote down every step, had apparently brought her concerns to a supervisor. The supervisor, who no longer worked at the company and cooperated fully with investigators in 2025, confirmed that Loretta had raised a concern internally and had been advised to document it and bring it back the following week. It is believed she instead arranged to meet with Pruitt directly. The meeting she had referenced to Rosa on Wednesday evening, the one she said she would explain later, she never got the chance. Forensic anthropologists confirmed on April 2, 2025, that the remains recovered from the concrete pad on Pruitt's Cornville property were those of Loretta Vasquez. The identification was made through mitochondrial DNA analysis, a process that works by extracting genetic material from bone tissue and comparing it against a biological reference sample. In this case, a DNA profile provided by Isabella Vasquez, Loretta's daughter, which matched the maternal genetic line conclusively. Dale Pruitt was arrested at his home in Cornville on the morning of April 9, 2025, by a 4-deputy team from the Yavapai County Sheriff's Department. Neighbors described seeing the patrol vehicles in his driveway in the early morning. One neighbor, a woman who had lived across the road from Pruitt for 20 years, said she stood on her porch and watched, and felt something she had never expected to feel about a man she had waved to 1,000 times. "I just kept thinking," she said in a local news interview. "How many times did he wave back?" He was charged with first-degree murder. He entered a plea of not guilty. At a preliminary hearing in June of 2025, the evidence presented by prosecutors, the property records, the DNA identification, the archived delivery logs, The testimony of Loretta's former supervisor was sufficient for the court to bind the case over for trial. As of this recording, proceedings are ongoing. Rosa Medina was 81 years old when Marisol Fuentes drove to her home in Prescott to tell her in person what had been found. Rosa had moved into a smaller house after Carl died, a single-story place with a garden that she still tended herself despite the arthritis and the cane. She was sitting at her kitchen table when the detective arrived. Fuentes told her everything. Rosa was quiet for a long time after. Then, she said, she had a meeting. Her voice was steady. She told me she had a meeting she would explain later. I always knew she had a meeting. She asked to see the green canvas bag. Loretta Vasquez was 31 years old. She had put herself through business school while working weekends at a laundromat. She had a spiral notebook with her goals on the left and the steps to reach them on the right. She had a daughter who saved her dessert until she had eaten everything else, and framed photographs above the kitchen table charting that daughter's growing up, and a plan that involved a real estate license and a yard and a future. She was building one careful step at a time. She carried her daughter's school photograph in her